On behalf of the International Institute of Natural Wellness Education, it's my privilege to welcome you to this lecture in our series on 5-element theory. Well, this is part 1 of our lecture on metal-air element. Now, 5-element theory, something that is not as common in Western society, has thousands of years of history in traditional Chinese medicine, but it also spans the traditional healings of China. We see similar methods or similar modalities popping up in Native American traditional healing practices, in Ayurvedic healing practices out of India, and seemingly all types of healing throughout the world have this concept of elements or foundational principles of who we are, and it is such a valuable tool for not just those of you that are working and becoming a master herbalist or advanced nutrition consultant, but for anyone that really enjoys learning how the body interacts with itself and with others. I don't know what I would do without it as a naturopath. It's very fundamental to how I practice. It really looking at the body as a whole. And it also gives us some powerful insights into personality, into what makes people tick, what drives and motivates people, and what inspires them. In natural medicine, we don't separate a distinction between the body and the emotion. We believe that every emotion has a physical reaction, and every physical reaction causes emotion. So we're not just looking at the body itself. And so because of that, 5-element theory, specifically what we're talking about here, and understanding the dominant elements, really becomes a fun thing, because it's something you can do. Even those of you that just are doing it for personality, to understand each other, it's really valuable in how to interact with family, how to interact with your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend. It's just or co-workers. It's really a valuable tool. And so as we proceed along, just so in a way of introduction, I'm Dr. Hollis, Executive Director here at the International Institute of Natural Wellness Education. And I want to remind you that by proceeding, you agree to all of these terms of use, including that all information and statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, are not intended to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any disease, are for informational purposes only, and by proceeding, you agree not to attempt to apply any principle or practice outlined herein unless you are otherwise licensed to do so. Now, I want to let everyone know, this lecture is for our Master Herbology and Advanced Nutrition students. However, there are some lectures that we make available to the public because it gives them an idea, being able to audit a class and sit in on a lecture, gives them an idea about what kind of things our program teaches. And this is one of those lectures. So we invite you to visit us online at knowyourwellness.org. Call us anytime at 208-899-2712 for more information on our online-based program in Master Herbology and Advanced Nutrition. And be sure to subscribe online or subscribe here on YouTube and like us on Facebook. So as we post more freely available classes, you'll be able to have access to those. I want to talk about the fundamental difference in natural wellness. Before we jump into looking at the body as a whole, let me address why that's such a fundamental difference. There's a common misconception that is way too widespread and perpetuated by companies coming up with quick fix remedies, that the only difference in natural medicine, that common misconception, is that natural medicine is simply taking a medical diagnosis, and instead of using a drug, instead, I'm going to use an oil or an herb or a homeopathic remedy. This is really, really a common misconception and couldn't be farther from the truth. What really separates natural wellness from mainstream medicine, and I honor and respect mainstream medicine, what they do with drugs and surgery to save lives is phenomenal, and at times that's the best course of action. But what we're really training and looking at is, rather than grouping a category of symptoms together, and then finding a drug or surgical or intervention option that will stop that symptom or that reaction in the body, what we're looking at is what was the origin, the genesis of that imbalance? What started it? And we really look at it from that standpoint so that we can help people make choices that would influence that by nourishing the body in the areas that the imbalance has started in. So it's coming at it from a different perspective. And you can't just cross over a medical diagnosis and assume it's the same in natural medicine, because the same medical diagnosis might have a dozen different origins or reasons for it. So the same remedies don't always apply. And that's the reason I bring that up, is we commonly when we do these, get people that post or come on Facebook or email or call us with medical questions saying, well, I have this sickness or this illness. What do I do? What does that mean? I want you to understand we can't answer those questions, so please don't send them in. We provide these, but you're metaphorically sitting in the back of our lecture hall listening to a class with students that are dedicating a huge amount of their time and to learning and understanding these principles. So some of this will be really valuable for it. There may be other things that don't fully make sense. If that's the case, then I invite you to consider being a part of a full program. Be it ours, I mean, we're very honored with the professors that teach for us. We have over a dozen professors that teach our Master Herbology and Advanced Nutrition program. And you work one-on-one with clinical advisors, people like Professor Smith and others that are so good at what they do. But whether it's our program or whether you find another online program, there's a lot of good ones out there. Stephen Horn does some phenomenal stuff. The Trinity and Westbrook, and there's several other schools that are really striving to teach principles of natural wellness. So if it's not ours, then find another one to really give you that understanding of form and function of the body so that you can really be good at what you're doing. So with that, let's go ahead and move forward by discussing what five-element theory really is. So if you took everything that you are, all of the systems of your body, your organs, your functions of the body, not to mention all the emotions and behavioral characteristics, the shape of your body, and you took all those things and you split them up split the variables up into 5 categories. That's what five-element theory is. It's a way of looking at the different parts of your body in 5 separate groups. Okay? So the reason we use the term element, and I shouldn't say we, I didn't come up with it, this is thousands of years old, coming out of China. The reason they use the elements like wood and fire and water and earth is because it was a simple way to help teach people that wood makes a fire bigger and water makes a fire smaller. So it helped people understand the interactions between these different categories. But I want you to think of them as a category. These are a category of body systems and functions. Okay, now I want to be real clear. I'll talk about energy as we're talking about the metal air element. I'm going to talk about metal energy or air energy. I don't want you to confuse that with energy of the air. I really run into this when we're talking about earth energy, and some people have been around healers or traditional medicine people or sometimes massage therapists or Reiki or different modalities that use the term energies to talk about an actual biomagnetic or an actual energy that's coming from the earth. That's not what we're talking about. So when you hear me say metal air energy, all you're going to be thinking is that I am referring to how much all of these systems, let me zoom in here. So all of these systems listed here, outlined right here, all of those systems, I'm simply talking about whether those are acting in a fast way or slowed, whether they're deficient in the nutrients they need to function right. So every time I talk energy, I'm not talking about an actual energy. I'm talking about the function of those elements. So I want you to be just really clear on that. Now, as we proceed here, we're going to be talking, as I mentioned, the fun part about this for those of you out there that may just be starting in this. It's really a fun way. You can sit down with your friends and family and figure out what elements you are. It's really a fun thing to do. So a lot of our discussion is going to be on dominant elements because everybody has one element that's a dominant element. Now, I've neglected in a couple of the lectures that you've heard me give on this topic, I've neglected to mention, so I want to make sure I bring it up here, that most people have a dominant primary and a secondary element. So as we're going through these and you think, wow, fire really resonated well with me, but there's a lot of the things about wood that resonated well. Well, then in that case, you would probably be a dominant fire with a secondary of wood. Or, whatever the combination being. It's okay to recognize and associate with two of them. But you're generally going to have one that's your primary, one that really is more the core of who you are. And sometimes, if you really take a close look, that secondary has been because of life circumstances. So somebody, for example, might really be an earth element, but because with fire comes leadership and responsibility and some of those things, charisma, maybe their job or whatever has forced them to have to do that a lot, but it's not as much their innate who they really are. So kind of think of that. We're really looking for who you really are innately, not what your job causes you to do, but really who you are. And so it's okay. I'm a fire with a secondary of wood, so I'm a forest fire. Is the running joke in a lot of our classes. I have one student that's a fire and a water, and oh my goodness, that's just steam. That's just a mess. Or somebody that's a fire earth. I always say that's lava. That's a tricky one. So you're going to have combinations. But for our discussion today, I really want you to mainly find what your dominant is. Even though you understand, you will likely have a secondary as well. So as mentioned, we're going to be talking about the dominant. And I've went ahead and highlighted, as you can see here in blue, the ones that relate specifically to the dominant element. Because we're also going to talk a little bit about balance. And balance relates to anyone. Because yes, I'm a fire personally, but I have metal air in me. I've got lungs, I've got a large intestine and a thymus, and I've got the emotions to go with. I've had happiness and grief, and I've got skin. So as you look down the list, I'm really all of these. One of them is more dominant. But we're also going to talk today about things to balance. And I don't want you to be confused that what I'm saying is only somebody who's a metal air needs to know how to balance metal air. All of us will, at different times in our life, have different elements go out of balance. So what we learn is by understanding them all, we can recognize when physiological reactions are happening or emotions or behavioral things, we can start to see, I think my earth element might be out of balance, or my metal air element might be out of balance. And then we can go ahead and go through the reactions for balancing that you'll see down here at the bottom. We also, you master herbology students and advanced nutrition students, you'll go through a whole lecture on supplements to balance them. We don't have time to go over that in this lecture. But this talks about ways to balance, things that we can do. And oftentimes just being aware of what's out of balance will bring a lot of it back into balance. So I've went ahead and circled this top one, dominant element. Then in this second section, I've circled the bottom two because they deal with dominant element. And then this third section, understanding, that deals with dominant elements. So all the students should have this chart in front of them, and it's available with your downloads and your program materials. And then you should have your full 5-element chart with you as well. So make sure you have those and paper in front of you, and we'll get started here. So face and analysis and features, these first two right here, these we're going to talk about a little, but we have a whole lecture just on face analysis and how to assess somebody's dominant element just off their face shape. But before I talk about that, you need to be very clear that I am not a proponent of only doing it off of face shape. Another common way, and a really useful one out there, we don't have any specific one that we recommend to you students, but there's some really good ones out there in ways of simple quizzes that you can take. And that simple quiz helps you understand what element you could be. But just like face analysis, there are going to be times when it's off. I have had several students in live classes that we teach on this for our Authentic Touch program and our Master Herbology and Advanced Nutrition program that took an online quiz and it was wrong. So a lot of that, a third one that I see a lot is people that tie it to the day of your birth, and depending on what time, similar to astrology, where based on when you were born determines your element. All of those may have some merit. What I want you to know is I want you to understand the elements. Then you can take those tools and go, you might be a metal. Let's talk through what a dominant metal is like and see if that is who you really are. That's the best way, in my opinion. All the others are useful, but only as a tool to a successful clinician. So, square face. Now, we talked for those that have been through the lectures on earth element, that is kind of a square-shaped face, but has a wider base, a thicker jowl. Now, metal air is an actual, more of a square, symmetrical face. However, square sometimes in people's mind has the feeling of boxy or big. That really isn't accurate with metal air. Now, this is the only element, incidentally, that has two. So we have it listed as metal. Here on the 5-element chart, you'll see metal air. So you'll hear me kind of run them together because I've taught this too many times where it sounds like I'm saying metal airs in one word. It's actually just in the teaching protocol. There's some distinction in Chinese medicine whether they called it air element or metal element, so we use both so that if you're referring to a different text and it says air element or another one might say metal element, you won't get confused. You'll understand that this system is the metal or air element, okay? So getting back to this, square is not a boxy big. It's actually, they have a visible bone structure often and long, thin nose. And as you look at their features, pale complexion, may or may not be. Clear skin is often common, and not clear from a lack of acne. What I mean by clear is smaller pores, more porcelain type skin. Shining eyes, very true. But if I was gonna say one of these was the most notable, it's probably this refined features. And that's why I say, when you say square, don't think boxy or big. Yes, a square shaped face, but it's actually thin skin, more refined often is the face and shape and features of this person. So again, we'll go into a whole lecture where we go into just face analysis, and we'll show you each of those. But this kind of gives you something to think on. Now, as we go into mannerisms, outspoken, and this one is probably the one that's the funniest. I shouldn't say the funniest, is the funniest when I'm teaching a class, not funniest I'm insulting somebody, but when I'm teaching a class, I always, if we've ahead of time defined who people are, when I get to talking about metals, and I bring up all that metals can tend towards pessimism and be a little pessimistic, they never agree with me. To them, they're always realists. If there's anyone in the room that is a family member, a spouse, a child, a parent, they're always laughing and going, yeah, can tend towards pessimism. So if that is the metal air element, just be aware they will likely, if that's their dominant element, never agree that they're pessimistic because they're not. They're realistic in their mind. And as we talk more about their personality, about the strengths and weaknesses, with any of these, it's not a negative, it's just what makes them tick. And as we talk about that, you'll see why to them, it's not pessimism, it's realism. It's just being realistic. And to fire, I laugh at this one. My wife isn't here in the studio with me today, but she's a metal element and I'm a fire element. And now some of you are laughing if you've already been through the fire element, because that's one that can be very tricky because of the differences in the way we view the world around us. So, but I wouldn't have been anywhere of where I am today if I didn't have that realist focus. So, it's a good and bad. It's a double-edged sword like all of these features. There's great value in that. So the energy is precise, meticulous. Wow, is that a good one to talk about, meticulous. You remember me talking about in the earth element. If you've done earth element, we talk a lot about how they're very good at repetitive. And I don't mean good as in a derogatory, but they enjoy that repetitive, secure stability. Well, metal air they enjoy very meticulous things, and they are very good at it. Very analytical. A lot of times you'll see attorneys or scientists that fall under this category, especially because of this right here. It's logic. the big logic. So they're not saying pessimism. They're saying it's not pessimistic. This is logical. If this happens, this will be the result. That's just the way it is. It's just logical. And the rest of us are going, well, that's pessimistic. Let's be optimistic. So they're huge. I mean, all of these on this energy are really specific. I would say all of these, more so than other elements, are very common in a metal air person. Self-control, they are amazing with self-control. To the love or hatred of those around them, they are very self-controlled. They sometimes, as a result, have a difficult time understanding and respecting those that don't have self-control because it comes more easily and naturally. So if that is you, just understand you have that likely and a more innate gift than other elements, and as such be understanding of those. But logical, self-controlled, analytical, meticulous, oh, really good. Now skip down while we're on that topic to this one down here under virtues and faults. Yeah, where's the one I'm looking for? Actually, skip to the next one because it fits in under emotion. Do you see archetype and spirit? Alchemist. I like to point that out because, an alchemist, you think of somebody that's the scientist mixing and meticulously figuring out the chemistry of the elements in the periodic table. Well, like I said, that's very fitting of the metal air elements. Very good with meticulous, precise tasks, okay? So as we go into pathology, and again, I remind you that I never use someone's pathology. If they come to me, for example, and had an imbalance in the respiratory system, I wouldn't say, oh, you must be a metal air dominant element. It's never used that way. The reason it's here under dominant element is if I know someone is a metal air dominant person, as their master herbalist and advanced nutrition consultant, I am going to be more cautious to always be aware of that and make sure that I nourish and encourage them to nourish those systems of the body to prevent any potential pathology that could result from that system being over or underworked. And really, so you understand the reason, it isn't that that system is inherently weak. It's that because that's a dominant system, it gets used more. I'm a fire, so I use my fire parts of me more than other people might. I'm in the front of the room teaching, often, where other people might not be. So as a result, I might burn out or use up that fire. It's probably not burn out, use up that fire energy. Likewise, somebody that's a metal air and good with meticulous things, they will either, one, have an excess of it, and in their life they don't have a way to express it, so it gets built up. Or on the other side, they'll have a job that is very suited to them, and as such, they use up all the metal air energy. Everything's about balance. And so it's not that that system is inherently weaker. It's just that a result of being dominant in that means that they could potentially overwork or underwork that system. So I'm going to look at things that are, that are related to, and again, we don't really have to list them. You can look right up here and see all the systems that are related. If you look up here in the right-hand corner, lungs, large intestine, thymus. And so as you look at this, the imbalance, the possible imbalances, you've got respiratory system, asthma, colitis. Think of large intestine, eczema. Now let me point that out. If we look over here, skin, do you see on this list that we're going to talk about in part 2, do you see how the right here, the tissue associated with metal air element is skin? That's why in Chinese medicine, all skin-related problems are actually a large intestine issue. So anytime I have, especially children that are having problems with skin, I always look at their digestive processes because I've yet to find one that doesn't have that imbalance. That's my opinion, my personal opinion of why we see so much eczema and skin problems in children today is because of the degrading in our food system. And it's a really scary thing that we could spend another 5 hours talking on and actually do in other lectures, but I will prevent that from this one. But anyway, anything skin disordered, colds, coughs, Airborne allergies, again, it's the respiratory system. So all those things are going to be more susceptible if that energy is out of balance. Separation anxiety, grief, those are really important ones, okay, to notice. Again, not that somebody has separation anxiety, I'm going to say, oh, they're dominant, but rather I'm going to make sure that they're aware to watch that grief can have a stronger effect on this personality than it can on others. Constipation, because it's large intestine. So let's go down here to their virtues and faults. Honoring protocol. Please circle that one. They're very good at honoring protocol. And that's an important one to understand. A little different than loyalty. It's not just the loyalty like you would see in an earth element. It's really the protocol. It's the way we planned on doing things. That's really important to them. Compassion, need to control and to be right. Another thing that anytime I teach this class, all the metal heirs say, no, that's not me. I don't need to be right. I just am right. Because of their ability to be so meticulous and precise, it isn't necessarily that they're trying to need to be right, but odds are, oftentimes they are right. And they know it, and they kind of get used to that because they're very meticulous and detail-oriented and very logical and self-controlled. So they kind of have that built into them. Honoring protocol, so preciseness, we've talked about that. So let's jump down here, scroll down, and talk about their biggest fear. Isolation is a really big fear for them, being alone. They really don't do well feeling alone. That just isn't going to work for me today. Let's try that one more time. Don't worry, when I'm teaching a live class, my drawings aren't any better, but using a mouse, they're especially kind of crazy. So, isolation, a really big thing for them. And really a lot of why they do what they do is because of that fear of isolation. What drives them to be right, what drives them to be very meticulous and good at what they do is they want to be able to keep doing it and being a part of things. They don't want to be isolated. So let's go down here to understanding. Respect, virtue, and discretion and authority. Discretion is huge. Circle that one. Okay? If you're married to a earth or a metal air element, I don't have to tell you this. But especially, we teach in all of our protocol classes about how to be very cautious with information, anything that people share with you. But I'm going to say with a metal air person, it goes way beyond that. Not even that you would be sharing anything as an herbalist, not that you're telling people about mental health problems that they've discussed with you. No, just even mentioning to someone, hey, I talked to so-and-so, they came in to see me into the clinic. They can take as something you shouldn't have shared. That was it's not your discretion to tell someone else that they came to see you, and so they can have a very, what others think of as a closed part to them. It's not closed, it's that they want things to be kept in discretion. So respect that. They respect virtue and authority. They revere beauty, ceremony, and refinement. That's a really, really good one right here, is revere beauty, ceremony, and refinement. I think of the face analysis stuff we talked about and how they're often, refined features. They really do kind of have a refined ability, and they really respect the beauty and the ceremony involved. They live according to reason and principle. It's logical. It's not the emotion. It's not pessimistic. It's reasonable, and it's just the way things are. They like definition, structure, and discipline. Wow, is that huge. Especially structure and discipline. Now, metal air and some of the others don't like change. This, for a earth elements don't like change as much, but for a metal air, it's not necessarily that they don't like the change. It's that if something was structured to be that way, we should do it that way because that's just how it's done. It's the discipline. So for them, it comes from more of a place of discipline. Now this one right here, primary concern is ritual. Ritual throws some people because ritual can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So maybe cross that out and say primary concern is ceremony. And doing things the way they were planned to be done. That's what it is with ritual. In the earth element, everything is done the way it's always been because tradition is very important. This isn't as much tradition, but it's more the ceremony. And sometimes those can have a crossover. But ceremony is very important. Doing things properly, refinement. So think of it less as the way things have always been done and more that this is the way things should be done because that's just how you do them. But again, very important to a metal air person. They linked to breath, the energy of the body, rhythm, and taking in and letting go. Formation, maintenance, dissolution of energy, bands, and growth of wisdom. Growth of wisdom is very important. I would underline that one for him in this little segment right here. They like to be growing and intellectually expanding. Completion, distill essence from experiences. So they can take all these experiences and bring them back together. I joke when I'm teaching classes about my wife being a metal air and me being a fire, but as you heard me say earlier, I wouldn't have succeeded in so many of the areas that I had if I hadn't had her wisdom and balance and being able to draw from and distill the essence of different experiences so that I could, she could help me see and move forward. So very valuable skills. I really have a lot of respect for each of the elements. There's a lot of really valuable stuff that we can learn from the metal air element, and that's why I'm glad that all of us have this within us. It's the potential that we all have. So now let's transition a little away from the dominant element and talk about balancing the elements. So again, just in way of reminder, we have all the elements within us. So it doesn't matter whether I'm a fire or a water, I have metal air element, and at times it's going to go out of balance. So let's talk about that. Now, as we go up here, I think this is our best place to talk about that, is right here. Now, as we look at that, when this energy is in balance, we have non-attachment. They feel a lot of self-worth. And non-attachment meaning that they can look at things from a analytical, from a standpoint of considering it. They don't have an attachment to a decision one way or another. I don't mean that from a non-attachment in that they aren't connecting to people, but more from decisions and reactions in life. A lot of self-worth they feel, spiritual connection, a lot of spiritual connection, and just feel very confident in what they're doing, able for inspiration, and so, really valuable. But like anything, when it goes out of balance either way, you're going to have one of two things. So if, regardless of who you are, whether you're a dominant element or earth element or metal air element or not, if you have times in your life where some of these things like precision and meticulous or analytical, or you're having to exude a lot of self-control, or different things are happening in your life that kind of use up your allotted metal air element amount, what you're going to see then is a deficiency where you just kind of feel empty. Petty. Little things bother you, petty things. You feel sad all the time, and on the petty stuff, it's stuff shouldn't bother you. It's stuff shouldn't bother you, but it still does. It just bothers you. Longing. And longing it just almost sometimes a feeling of longing that you can't know what you're longing for. Somebody said, "What are you longing for?" I don't know. I'm just longing. Self-deception. That's a difficult one we all face, is not seeing things the way they really are. And so we can get into a state of self-deception when we're deficient. Now on the other side, if maybe you have a lot of metal air element, but you aren't in a position where you can be in control, or where you're able to honor protocol, or where you have the time to be meticulous and you want to do something meticulous, but you've got to move through it quickly. When those type of things happen, or with any of these, it could be maybe it has nothing to do with your life circumstances. Maybe it's that your large intestine mobility is faster or slower, or your lungs are functioning faster or slower. So like I mentioned, it isn't just emotional. It can also be physical. But for whatever reason, you get excess metal air energy. That's where you get into these problems right here, where you start becoming vain, and really vanity becomes a problem. That need or ability to be analytical can lead to feeling very self-righteous and feeling like you know better than everyone else. Pontification, want to explain and spend a lot of time talking about why it is, and again, because you don't have enough time or enough expression of that analytical, that you really start focusing on that. So those all can come out of balance. When I see this in people, especially with fires or metal airs, when you see it, be careful, because if they're in that state, they're not going to like you telling them that that's out of balance and that you seem self-righteous and negative. They won't like that any more than a fire will like being told that they don't have the self-confidence and some of those things. So be cautious in how you express it to somebody. That's why I usually use this chart. And I usually don't ever start with reading them these right here. That's not a good place to start. Okay? Frankly, I don't usually read them any of those. I don't read them up here about faults. Usually what I'll read to people, if I say, I think part of it is, if it's a dominant element, I'll read them this right here, this section right here. But if it's not a dominant element, so I guess I shouldn't say I don't ever read it. If it's not a dominant element, I might read them this one right here, okay? And so what I might do in that is I might say, you know, when this energy is balanced, these are the things that people can expect. And a lot of them, and I read the balanced first, because then I'm telling them this is really who you are. This is, and say you probably have those abilities within you, and they'll nod, yes, I do have that. But then what you might mention to them is, you know, but like with anybody, if life circumstances, physical or emotional or situational, cause things to go out of balance, what we'll see is one of these other two, and I'll read them that. As long as you preface it with a temporary out of balance state, usually it doesn't come off as a negative to them that they're going to argue with. Okay? So that's a really good way to work with somebody in this situation. So now let's talk about balancing. We've went through all of those, so balancing. The actions down here, the healing reactions right here, okay, for those people. Breathing, regular aerobic exercise. Actually, let me pause on breathing. Breathing and regular aerobic exercise, two separately. The reason I put breathing in here is we don't teach people to breathe. I have long time, and you guys have heard me say there's two things that we never teach our children, how to eat and how to breathe. And I don't mean how to eat in what to eat, because that's another thing we forget to teach them. I'm talking in how to eat. Taking bites, properly masticating your food, sitting down and getting into a calm state before you eat, how much water to consume when you eat. I mean, basic how to eat. Likewise, we rarely teach people how to breathe. Now, in your, I won't go into that because in your lecture on autonomic nervous system function, where we talked about the autonomic nervous systems being broken into sympathetic and parasympathetic, we went into some good ways to teach people some basic breathing techniques. But I would recommend those. Breathing techniques for a metal air person are sometimes hard for them to want to do. So like so many things that we've talked about, you know, not eating sweets for earth elements, but yet they're going to crave that a lot when it's out of balance. Or going to bed early for fire elements, yet they're going to have a hard time going to bed early when it's out of balance. So likewise, breathing is really good and a healing reaction for a metal air imbalance, but sometimes it's difficult for them to do. If that's the case, think of an activity that will cause that. Something like playing a flute or singing or something that's going to cause breathing, or regular aerobic exercise. That's why that comes in right here. It's not that the exercise is what you're needing, it's the breathing that you're trying to get. So if somebody says isn't physically capable of exercising, that's fine. To balance this element, it isn't the exercise, it's the breathing. So be grateful. You know, have them keep I recommend that they look at doing a gratitude journal. It's really good. Stay in the present. That's really helpful because they're going to be very focused on the future, because that part of them that allows them to analytically forecast the future can turn into pessimism, and they can get stuck in what is to come and forget to be in the present about what is good and grateful right now. They be surrounded by elegance. They're going to like beauty and nice things. It's going to be nurturing for them. You know, a wood element or an earth element, get them out in the dirt, get them gardening, you know, get them connected to the earth. For a fire, a new project, just go do something new and different, regardless of if you have 5 other projects started. So everyone has a different one, but for a metal air, something elegant, refinement, beauty, are all very important. Expressing creativity, but again in the way that it's expressing in more of a refined way, which for them might be organizing or being creative on how to put something together that other element types may not look at as creative. Because some might assess creative, you should have an art or one of the performing arts. That would be creative, where for them it might be a different creative outlet than you would think. But I'll make sure that they have that expression of creativity, or if this is you, find something you can do to be creative and to kind of let that energy flow. Lots of minerals. It's kind of a separate one, but we'll talk about in a little bit, but they metabolize minerals, so lots of minerals. Eliminate junk food, similar to Earth. Junk food's really hard. Not just the sweets, but the chips and the crackers and all those things. Focus on the spiritual side. They're going to want to think, but this is, again, a tricky thing. This is balancing for them. This is a balancing reaction for them, is to focus on spirit and mind and intellectual. However, the fact that in stressful circumstances where they're out of this energy, likely you're going to see the self-deception, sad, come out, but especially the part that others can construe as controlling, and specifically the part that we might say tends towards pessimism right here. That's going to come out, which means if you're in a pessimistic state, it's going to be very much this needs done. We don't have time to do that. So it's going to be harder for them to take time and to focus on the spiritual side. So sometimes removing from the situation is helpful. Taking a little, afternoon off and going somewhere where you can be surrounded by refinement, and sitting and reading and meditating, and those things would really bring this back into balance. Now, the foods to build, as you know, we have a whole section on supplementation to balance these energies. So this is about the foods that are going to be helpful for this. Grains and root vegetables, not as much the potatoes, but other root vegetables, pears, nuts and seeds. Now, root vegetables are really high in minerals, tying back to the mineral concept. Nuts and seeds, grains, of course, properly sprouted and good grains. Pungent spices such as ginger and black pepper. Spice gets you breathing, and that's really helpful here. So those now foods to avoid: too much baked or barbecued food, smoked foods. Again, those have an impact on the respiration. Too much dairy products. Dairy, as you know, will often stimulate a mucosal buildup that will make breathing harder. If you have a stuffy nose or extra mucus congestion in the bronchial pathways, breathing can be harder. So all of these have a place, but I hope this gives you a better understanding, and that as you've been watching this, you've thought of people that that you think, wow, that's really them. That makes sense, and I hope you take this to then see the best in them, and to focus on how you can help, how they can help be in balance. And remember that you have all of these elements in you, so learn how to balance the metal air element within you. As always, thank you for your participation. Nothing I enjoy more than teaching, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you wanting to learn this. As always, visit us online. For those of you that are auditing this class, visit us online, knowyourwellness.org. Subscribe and like and all those things as well, so we can make sure that when we have things available, be it classes in your area or when we have more free lectures available, you can enjoy those. So as always, thank you for being here, and on behalf of the International Institute of Natural Wellness Education, remember that wellness is your choice. Thank you.